Today at the National Press Club, Israel's ambassador to Australia, Hillel Newman. Ambassador Newman has previously served as senior policy advisor to Israel's parliament and to multiple foreign affairs ministers, and has held several previous diplomatic postings. He is the ambassador with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name is Tom Connell. I'm the club's president and also an anchor at Sky News Australia. Our guest today is Ambassador Hillel Newman, the relatively new ambassador of Israel to Australia. And a busy time, of course. His address comes at a time when Israel is waging a war on Lebanon and Iran, strikes as well on Syria and Yemen, and the effects being felt worldwide, including in Australia. There has been a ceasefire in Gaza for 5 months, but airstrikes have continued there as well. And relations with Australia, arguably at their lowest ebb over a few different issues, including Palestinian recognition and anti-Semitic attacks in Australia, including the recent Bondi attack. I'll note as well the NPC has been in contact with the Palestinian delegation and the Lebanese embassy about them speaking at the press club at some stage in the future. But please welcome Ambassador Hillel Newman.
Sorry. Surprised me. Good afternoon. Thank you to the National Press Club for inviting me here today. Thank you so much. Welcome all, and I thank you also for joining and taking of your time to be with us here today. I feel somewhat intimidated speaking here between Minister Farrell and the Prime Minister Albanese, but I'll try fit in somehow. It is an honor to stand here before you to address such a distinguished audience, senators, parliamentarians, fellow diplomats, colleagues, members of the press, and friends. Thank you all for joining us today. Allow me to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. My friends, the times we are living in are not ordinary times. We are actually in historic times, witnessing what may well be a reshaping of the Middle East, and perhaps even the global order in general. A month ago, I arrived in Australia, a country that in many ways brings my own story full circle. I was born in South Africa. My father enjoyed a most prestigious position in South Africa, but they made a decision that would shape the course of my life. My parents decided to give it all up and leave. They left out of conviction, out of a refusal to accept a system of segregation and injustice. They wanted to raise their children in a society that aspired to equality, to diversity, to shared destiny. So they chose Israel. Our roots were the Lithuanian and Czechoslovakian, yet our neighbors in Israel came from North Africa, Yemen, Morocco, Eastern Europe, Ethiopia, and yes, even Iran. That was my first lesson in what truly Israel is all about. A living, breathing mosaic of people, histories, and identities. A beacon of democracy and progressive values. A society which dreamed of peace and coexistence with our Arab and Muslim neighbors. It was this fascination with history, with identity, with the story of the Jewish people that led me into the field of history, teaching ancient history, and later into diplomacy. I moved from the academic world to the diplomatic world in order to be part of making history rather than only studying it. Israel proved itself to be a land of opportunity for me. Despite being an immigrant from far lands, I was endowed with the privilege of representing my country across the world, including in 2 Muslim countries, and influencing decision-making as policy advisor to 3 foreign ministers of Israel. Now, I have the privilege of representing Israel in this beautiful country, Australia. Israel is and will always be a beacon of hope. Yet, its history has been marked by profound hardship. Israel is the ancestral biblical homeland of the Jewish people, the chosen land, but it is situated in a difficult neighborhood, surrounded by those who seek to annihilate it. They seek its destruction for what it represents: a modern democracy, Western civilization, and a national home for the Jewish people. There is no other country in the Middle East that upholds the same democratic ideals of Australia as Israel does. With Israel's declaration of independence, 5 Arab states invaded Israel with the declared objective of annihilating it. The Arab League convened in Khartoum and adopted the 3 no's: no peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with it, amounting to a complete rejection of Israel in any borders. Till today, sadly, the majority of the Arab League and Muslim bloc refuse to recognize Israel in any borders. The root cause of this hostility and of decades of conflict in the Middle East is not the disputed territories in Judea and Samaria. It is the refusal to accept Israel's existence in any form. It stems from radical ideologies that reject coexistence, oppose the values of the free world, and negate principles of open societies. Israel is on the front due to its location. But this struggle is not Israel's alone. It is shared by all countries that uphold democratic Western values, including Australia. Since its re-establishment, Israel has aspired to peace. That aspiration led us to take risks, guided by the paradigm of territories for peace. We relinquished parts of our historic homeland in pursuit of that goal. During the Oslo process, we withdrew from areas of Judea and Samaria known as the West Bank, but we did not receive peace. We received terrorism. A wave of suicide bombers began. More Israelis were killed in the year after Oslo than in the entire decade that preceded Oslo. Nevertheless, in 2005, we withdrew completely from Gaza, removing every Israeli citizen who had lived there for decades. I remember the heart-wrenching images of families being removed from their homes, even the relocation of graves, all in the hope of creating a new reality of coexistence. We believe that if given the opportunity, our neighbors would choose to build their future rather than destroy ours. We were wrong. Hamas took control of Gaza. Instead of building schools and hospitals, they dug terror tunnels and produced rockets. Their desire to annihilate Israel was stronger than their care for their own children and livelihood. With states that did accept Israel's right to exist, we signed peace agreements. We established peace with Egypt, Jordan, normalized relations with 4 additional Arab states via the Abraham Accords. Israel continued to carry optimism, believing that one day the radicalized Palestinians and Arab world, our immediate neighbors, might prioritize their future over hatred and choose Israel as an ally rather than an enemy. But then came October the 7th, 2023. On a single day, more than 1,200 Israelis were brutally murdered, and 251 were taken hostage. It was the most lethal and brutal attack on Jews since the Holocaust. Children were mutilated and killed before the eyes of their parents, and parents suffered the same fate in front of their children. Women and men were subjected to brutal sexual abuse, both in their homes and later in captivity. The communities attacked were on the left side of Israeli politics, dedicated to building coexistence with Gaza. Some of them took Gazans to hospitals for medical treatment. That day changed something fundamental in Israeli society. It became painfully clear that such threats cannot be managed or contained. They must be confronted. To eliminate the ongoing threat from Gaza, Israel launched a military campaign against Hamas, not against Palestinians. When a state is attacked in such a manner, its first obligation, its most basic duty, is to protect its citizens. Israel entered a war it did not seek, but one it could not avoid. As the months unfolded, we found ourselves facing multiple fronts all supported by Iran. The Iranian issue is not only an Israeli issue. It is regional and it is global. Since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, hostility towards Israel and the West has been embedded in the regime's ideology and strategy. The slogan, "Death to Israel, death to America," were not empty rhetoric. They were a blueprint for action. They became policy. History has taught us that poisonous rhetoric quickly becomes physical violence. The distance between the burning of books and the burning of flesh is very short. Over decades, the regime built and financed a global network of proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, extending its reach across the region and beyond. It became the foremost state sponsor of terrorism, the largest proliferator of weapons, planning attacks around the globe and destabilizing the entire Middle East. At the same time, it pursued nuclear capabilities and developed vast ballistic missile arsenals with a clear goal of destroying Israel and Western civilization. For more than 20 years, the international community sought resolution through diplomacy. Negotiations were pursued in good faith. Opportunities were extended for a peaceful solution, but the pattern was clear: delay, evasion, and non-compliance. Even the International Atomic Energy Agency reported repeated violations, and yet nothing was done. Intelligence indicated that the regime intended to rapidly replenish its nuclear and ballistic programs, conceal them deep underground, and achieve immunity by that from future attacks. Their plan was to produce hundreds of rockets per month, stockpile thousands, and then launch them simultaneously against Israel and the West, creating an existential danger. Israel has developed the world's most sophisticated air defense systems, with more than 90% interception success. Yet even the best systems cannot withstand thousands of rockets launched at once. The window to act was narrowing. Israel and the United States, therefore, took action. Not for territory, not for resources, but in self-defense. The main objective of the operation was removing immediate existential threats: the regime's nuclear ambitions, its missile program, and the infrastructure that sustains them. The operation also targets the leadership of the IRGC and Basij forces, mechanisms of repression that have held the Iranian people hostage for decades. Let me be clear. Our conflict is not with the people of Iran. We distinguish sharply between the regime and the people. We remember fondly that ancient Persia was a friend. Cyrus the Great was the great redeemer of the people of Israel. He's even mentioned in the Bible. This operation aims to bring freedom to the people of Iran. Freedom is a privilege which we, as members of the free world, should not take for granted. And we believe the people of Iran deserve the same. Over the past weeks, Israel and the United States have acted with as much precision as possible, targeting military infrastructure and leadership. The Iranian regime, by contrast, has directed fire towards civilian populations in Israel and across the region, indiscriminately and intentionally. Millions of Israelis have to run to shelters multiple times a day, often with only seconds to save their lives. Homes have been destroyed, families injured and killed. Just days ago, during the final days of the Ramadan, rockets launched from Tehran landed in the old city of Jerusalem, dangerously close to the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Western Wall. These rockets make no distinctions. They were designed to kill Muslims, Jews, and Christians alike. The hypocrisy is staggering. For years, the regime has falsely accused Israel of undermining the Al-Aqsa Mosque and rallied mobs with this propaganda. Yet it is they who came close to demolishing the mosque with their own rockets. The Islamic regime has escalated attacks across the region, targeting 12 countries, including some that previously offered them diplomatic support. This conduct underscores the reality. Iran is a regional threat, a rogue regime without meaningful checks or balances. Now, allow me to share a personal story. About 2 years before Israel normalized relations with 4 Arab countries under the Abraham Accords, I visited one of the Gulf states with our foreign minister. It was a confidential visit. Since we did not have diplomatic ties with this country, we traveled on a private, unmarked jet. We sat at a small table with the country's leadership. Our counterparts expressed a desire to normalize relations with Israel, but they also shared their concerns. They said, "We know Israel is a friend, not an enemy. We understand the potential benefits of official relations. But what if we are attacked by radical forces? What if Iran targets our oil tankers or oil fields? We would lose billions of dollars. Is it worth signing normalization with Israel and risking billions of dollars?" It was at that moment that I realized their concerns were not about Israel. They were about the radicals, some of them their fellow Muslim brothers. This insight remains true today. The main barrier in the Middle East is not between religions, Muslims and Jews, or Muslims and Christians, nor is it between nations, like Israelis and Jordanians. It is the tension between moderates and radicals. The real battle is between moderation and extremism. This is not a clash between civilizations, but a confrontation between barbarism against civilization. Our goal must be to strengthen the moderates and weaken the radicals. This is precisely what Israel is doing in this current operation. By reducing the power of the radical Islamic regime, we are removing a fear barrier, opening opportunities for peace. This can widen the circle of the Abraham Accords, expand regional cooperation, and most likely reshape the Middle East for all times. We can then implement foreseen great plans like the energy corridor, running from Asia through the Persian Gulf to Israel, bringing the world together. We can dream. In the context of this conflict, I acknowledge 2 issues are of special concern: Lebanon and the energy crisis. So allow me to relate to them directly, briefly. For years, Israel has aspired to sign a peace deal with Lebanon, but every attempt has been torpedoed by radical terrorists, including assassinations of the president of Lebanon. Lebanon is a country of extraordinary potential, yet it remains held hostage by a force that does not answer to its people, Hezbollah, a proxy of Iran. Hezbollah has been based in southern Lebanon for years, raining terror on both Israelis and Lebanese alike. Israel urged Lebanon and Hezbollah not to enter the conflict. Yet, 5,000 missiles, rockets, and drones have been fired against Israel from Lebanese territory since March the 2nd, in violation of the November 2024 ceasefire we established. A large proportion of those rockets and drones were fired at Israel from the south of the Litani River, an area that the Lebanese army declared to be under its operational control. Last week, the Lebanese foreign minister set a deadline for the expulsion of the Iranian ambassador. That deadline expired, yet he still sips coffee in Beirut. This demonstrates how Lebanon has lost control and is in practice occupied by Iran. Hezbollah serves Iran's interests, not those of the Lebanese people. When the Lebanese state is unable to dismantle this threat, Israel is compelled to act. Israel is exercising its right to protect its civilians as any country would. Some seek to deny Israel this fundamental right simply because of who we are, as if our blood were less red than others. Hezbollah must be demilitarized. This is not only Israel's call, but the call of the international community, including Security Council resolutions. We may recall that through Israel's precise operations like the pager pinpointed attack and the elimination of Nasrallah, the Lebanese people gained the opportunity to assert their sovereignty and vote in a new president. President Aoun courageously called for Hezbollah's demilitarization. He has even expressed the willingness to negotiate peace with Israel, inshallah. But Lebanon will not regain its freedom until a decision is made in Beirut and elsewhere to confront the Iranian occupation and its proxy, the Hezbollah. We sympathize with the people of Lebanon who suffer as a result of Hezbollah's foreign loyalties and actions. The current incursion of IDF in Lebanon is for defense purposes only, and the appeal to people to evacuate parts of South Lebanon are for their safety. Regarding the energy crisis, the Iranian regime thrives on instability, and is demonstrating this very bluntly during this war. As I mentioned earlier, the Iranian terror regime has carried out attacks against 12 countries in the region. It launched a long-range missile capable of reaching 4,000 kilometers. Cities like London, Paris, and Berlin are now within its reach. It lied about this capability and concealed it. Iran is still weaponizing the Strait of Hormuz, impacting global oil and fuel prices. This demonstrates the regime's willingness to inflict economic pain on households and businesses across the world. This is something felt strongly here in Australia and concerns many when filling their petrol tanks. We share that concern with you. The Australian government has joined others in the international community in condemning Tehran's actions aimed at closing the Strait of Hormuz and intentionally creating global instability. Let us note, though, the attacks against maritime commercial shipping began before this current military operation. The Houthis, under the behest of Iran, have been threatening and attacking maritime travel for years. Efforts are being extended to make sure that the energy concerns are temporary and minimal, diversifying energy sources, opening new channels of supply chains, and deterring future attacks in the Strait. The ultimate remedy, though, is removing the ultimate threat, Iran and its proxies. Australia understands the Iranian threat firsthand. Recent Iranian-linked activities on Australian soil have reminded us that terror knows no borders. The government responded to this intelligence with firm diplomatic and security measures, including designating the IRGC as a terrorist entity and expelling the Iranian ambassador. When Israel launched its operation against the existential threat posed by the Iranian regime, Australia recognized the danger and rightly stood by its allies in confronting destabilizing behavior in the region. I would like to take this opportunity to commend the Australian government for its clear stand on Iran, firmly on the right side of history. Israel and Australia stand in the same camp of moderate, modern democracies that value human rights and uphold democratic principles. That has long characterized the relationship between our two countries. Our connection is deeply rooted in history and founded on shared values. It is only natural for Australia and Israel to be close allies. This relationship is based on values, principles, and mutual interests. Both nations can benefit greatly from a strong partnership, further strengthened by the vibrant Australian Jewish community whose connection to Israel is enduring and profound. Like all relationships, there can be times of disagreement, but these disagreements should not overshadow the fundamental shared values. In Israel, citizens can openly criticize their leaders, hold rallies, and exercise their democratic rights without fear of retribution. Criticism is part of our heritage. As the saying goes, if you have two Israelis, you have 4 opinions. But when criticism crosses into calls for the annihilation of Israel, killing of Jews, it ceases to be legitimate debate and becomes anti-Semitism. Often described as the most ancient disease of mankind, anti-Semitism adapts to new times, languages, and contexts. It comes from the right, from the left, and the center. In modern discourse, some disguise this hatred under the guise of anti-Zionism or opposition to the Jewish state. We can debate the question of a Palestinian state or the roots of the conflict or the destiny of the settlements. But when people apply double standards to Israel, demonize it, or lie to preserve an anti-Israel agenda, this is anti-Semitism. When they call for the annihilation of the state of Israel, glorify the murder of Jews and Israelis, or seek to delegitimize the only democratic Jewish majority state, this is not legitimate criticism. It is anti-Semitism. Slogans such as "from the river to the sea" and "globalize the Intifada" are expressions of this hatred. Following the brutal Hamas attack on October 7th, even before Israeli bodies had been retrieved, and before the victims' blood had been cleared from the paths of Kibbutz, Kfar Aza, and Be'eri, rallies appeared in New York City and outside the Sydney Opera House supporting Hamas. Participants celebrated the slaughter of Jews and Israelis. This is anti-Semitism. Self-proclaimed human rights activists who ignore documented sexual assaults against Israeli women simply because the victims are Israeli and dismiss them as propaganda or falsely say debunked are betraying human rights. Sadly, anti-Semitism is on the rise worldwide, including here in Australia, a country known for its diversity and openness. Jewish citizens have faced attacks in neighborhoods, schools, synagogues, university campuses, and public spaces. This did not start on October the 7th. What began as graffiti and vandalism tragically escalated to bullets on Bondi Beach. This violence is real. It is happening here. It is our collective obligation to ensure that our Jewish brothers and sisters can live freely, worship safely, and live without fear. Some have lost their moral compass and do not understand what this conflict is all about. In the superficial division of the world between oppressor and oppressed, Israel and the USA are often falsely cast as the oppressors. This clouds their judgment, and then truth becomes secondary. Some support Hamas and Iran, radical entities which hang gay people from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair. Some self-proclaimed human rights activists disregard documented sexual violence or disregard the rocket attacks on Israel and the necessity of self-defense simply because the victims are Jews or Israelis. The hypocrisy and bias of self-proclaimed human rights activists is clear. They can ignore mass atrocities in Syria, Africa, Iran, and elsewhere simply because the perpetrators do not fit the identity narrative and cannot be portrayed as Jews or Israelis. To the members of the press here today, your work is not only important, it is essential. You hold governments accountable. You question power. You can bring complexity where it is needed. In an age of disinformation, manipulation, and false narratives that travel faster than facts, characteristic of our times, your responsibility is greater than ever. I commend you for standing to this challenge. As you may know, foreign correspondents covering the Middle East typically choose Israel as their base. They do this because they know that Israel is the safest place that allows them to work freely. They can question, investigate, and critique. Sadly, journalists are sometimes pressured to echo false accusations before verifying them, feeding propaganda and disinformation. But we encourage and support the vast majority who honor their profession. I know there is a campaign out there against Israel claiming that Israel has killed 250 or 300 or 500 journalists. Any number goes in bashing Israel. We can relate to this in the Q&A if so requested. Sorry. Finally, a few relevant thoughts in light of the conflict. Australia has long relied on its geographical isolation for security and on its values of social cohesion and multiculturalism. Recent events demonstrate that these alone are no longer safeguards. In today's world, with radical ideologies and rapidly evolving technologies, geographical distance and even oceans are no longer guarantees of safety. Suicide bombers, rocket launchers, drones, and precision missiles can strike anywhere. The homeland itself is the front today. Radicalized individuals can target a Nova festival in Israel or a Hanukkah celebration in Sydney. These threats are real, immediate, and global. Our freedom and security are not guaranteed. We are living through a test of the free world, a test of whether countries like Australia, like Israel, and like many others, truly understand what is at stake. We may be separated by distance, by history, and by politics, but at the end of the day, we, the moderates, the like-minded countries, are part of the same camp. We share the same values. We share the same threats. We must stand together and defend our values. You do not always choose the moment of challenge, but you do choose how to respond. Finally, the Bible states in Deuteronomy 30, I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live. That is the choice before us, not just in the Middle East, but globally. Whether we allow fear and extremism to shape our future, or whether we stand together for stability, for freedom, and for life. Like I said in my opening, the times we are living in are not ordinary. They are historic. We are reshaping the Middle East and creating a better future for our children. Tomorrow, the Jewish people will celebrate the holiday of Passover, remembering the journey from slavery into freedom. That is what I pray for today. A free and peaceful Middle East, freedom for the people of Iran and for all mankind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Feel free to grab a water, but just come back for questions up here if you can,
sure.
Please, just for the camera angles and so on. You mentioned it being safer to be a journalist in Israel, and it hasn't been very safe to be a journalist in Gaza. You alluded to estimates. The IFJ says 234 journalists have been killed during the war in Gaza. The CPJ says 213. The UN only counts those in the active line of duty, 50 to 60. Lebanon, so far, the number is quoted as 12. I want to go to one of those as an example. So the IDF killed 3 Lebanese journalists in a strike in southern Lebanon on Saturday. The IDF says Ali Shoaib was working with the military wing of Hezbollah. It did post a picture of him in military uniform, which it later admitted was photoshopped. It also made no mention of the other 2 journalists killed, Fatima Fattouni and Mohammed Fattouni. If we didn't even hear who they were or what the justification was at all then, does that mean they were just collateral damage?
Thank you for your question. And I'm glad at any opportunity to explain the facts and set the truth straight. First of all, Israel respects and even commends journalists. As I said, many journalists are stationed in Israel due to the fact that they feel that Israel is safe for them and a place of freedom. And there is a campaign against Israel about the amount of journalists that have been killed and whether they've been intentionally killed, etc. So let's state the facts. Israel has never targeted a journalist just for being a journalist. The truth behind it is that Hamas and Hezbollah guise themselves as press and remain terrorist operatives. I can send to any journalist who's interested lists of dozens of journalists, so-called journalists, who were actually, are or were, operatives of Hamas and Hezbollah. They dress up as ambulance drivers. They know that Israel will be very careful not to hit ambulances, not to hit anything, schools. They stay in schools and in mosques just in order to try and guise themselves and get out of the line of fire. This is actually a war crime. It's against international law. But the abuse of press codes, press slogans, the abuse of ambulances, they abuse these aspects in order to try and save themselves from attack. But they are Hezbollah and Hamas operatives. Now, there can be a tragic mistake. In a war zone, there are tragic mistakes. Israel is sorry for any civilian life, whether journalist or other, that is affected in some way in any conflict of some kind. But I can assure you here that Israel has never targeted a journalist who is a journalist, 100% journalist. Regarding the incident that you mentioned in Lebanon, let me, I have to find the page for the names of the people, but two, I'll just mention in general. If you want the names, I can give them to you. They were dressed up as journalists, but they were members of what is called the Radwan forces of the Hezbollah.
So all three you're saying were those?
We know, I'll give you the names if you want. I can go.
Was Ali Shoaib was the one where we had a post?
Yes. Now the
in
post.
Military
Let me relate to
uniform.
The post.
And the other two you're saying they were as well a member of that group?
I can name the two. The third one we're not sure about. We're not sure whether we assume that because he was with the two, he was also a terrorist with them. Two of them we've identified as terrorists. And they're also identified by Hezbollah as terrorists. That's the interesting part here. But let me say a word about the post. There was a post which pictured this terrorist, right, half face as a terrorist and half face as a press. And then the IDF was attacked because the IDF admitted this was an illustration post. But we have authentic photos and pictures which I can send to anybody who wants of this individual in military uniform of the Hezbollah. So the truth behind it is that he was a true terrorist, 100% terrorist. And they made a post in order to illustrate the fact that he was guising as a journalist. And then IDF was attacked because they're as if making up that he's a terrorist. We didn't make up that he's a terrorist. We have authentic pictures of him as a terrorist.
So we didn't, at the time though, we didn't hear anything about, so the two others were Fatima Fatuni and Mohammed Fatuni.
Yeah.
So one might not have been and they could have been simply collateral damage. Is that what you're saying?
What Israel has identified here, I'll get you the names. Yes. Ali Hassan Shaib, he was the one in the post that was regarded as an illustration post that Israel was attacked because IDF admitted that it's an illustration post. But they immediately assumed that the whole picture was a fake, which is not, because we have authentic pictures of this individual in military warfare of the Hezbollah. He served in the Hezbollah's Radwan force. While covering as a journalist, in 2020 he officially joined Hezbollah's military wing. In the same strike was Mohammed Fatuni. He was also neutralized. He also served in Hezbollah's military wing, operating under the guise of a journalist. So they abuse the profession of journalists, portray themselves as journalists, but they are not. When people outside quote 250, 300 journalists, what they're doing is they're just buying hook, like and sinker. They're just taking for themselves statements by Hamas and Hezbollah without verifying, without checking. If they would check, they would find that the majority of all the journalists, so-called journalists that were affected, were actually activists guised as journalists.
A lot of questions to get through, so I'll go to the former colleague, Matthew, not
Hello, Mr. Ambassador. You spoke about your family leaving segregation and injustice in South Africa. The Knesset overnight really passed a new law which would apply the death penalty to Palestinians who commit murder in the West Bank. That law wouldn't apply equally to Israelis who murder Palestinians in the West Bank. What do you say to human rights organisations that say policies like this that apply unequally are policies of apartheid? And what do you say to Australians who perhaps have had historical affinity for Israel, but who see policies like this, they see what's happened in Gaza, and they say they don't feel that these are two countries with shared values anymore?
Okay. I grew up in South Africa. I walked the streets and I saw benches which said on them for whites only. I saw buses which said for blacks only. That was the reality that I grew up in South Africa. And then I moved to Israel. And I found a society where you've got Arabs, Christians, and Jews who live side by side in peace and harmony. We have approximately 2 million Israeli Arabs in Israel who serve on the Supreme Court, who serve in the Knesset. The third largest party in the Knesset is the Arab Party. Name one country in the Middle East that Jews can run as a party and serve in the parliament, or you find Jews in such a situation. So, I'm coming to it. You have a separate population, which is termed by international media and others what we call Palestinians, or we'd call it the Arab population that has not accepted Israeli jurisdiction. They were offered. They could have accepted Israeli jurisdiction years ago. They decided not to, due to the fact that we have this separate population which is not part of the Israeli state because they will not wish not to be part of the Israeli state. We set up the Palestinian Authority. And they are represented by the Palestinian Authority. They have Palestinian passports. They're a separate entity. There is no apartheid or separation within Israel amongst the citizens by religion or sex or race. All those who are members, who are citizens of Israel, have equal rights and equal opportunity. Many people serve in our Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are Arab, Druze, Christian. Equal rights and equal opportunity in Israel. The question of the Palestinian population, which has chosen not to be part of Israel, and are now under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority, is a separate entity. Therefore, the law of Israel does not apply equally on Israelis or Palestinians who are not part of the state of Israel.
Including the death penalty.
Now, let's move to the death penalty. Decision went through the Knesset to instate the death penalty in Israel. Now, let me just clarify. There always was a death penalty in Israel. It just wasn't implemented. There were only 2 cases in the history of Israel where they implemented the death penalty. One of them was Eichmann, the Nazi. It was always there, but it was not implemented due to the restraint that Israel acted on this issue. Israel is very careful, and Israel is a human rights state, is very careful not, we know that mistakes can be made in capital punishment. But we reached a situation where you have terrorists on your border, terrorists crossing the border, attacking communities, and the usual punishment is no deterrent because they believe, first of all, they get released in exchanges of prisoners. They then attack again in order to exchange prisoners. So we understand that this is not a deterrence besides the ideological radical beliefs that they have, which are deranged. We needed extra deterrence. So the laws went through, which actually, again, I said, just like in the United States, in Japan, and in India, which have capital punishment. Israel has the right as a sovereign state to decide that it is implementing the capital punishment that it has. But safeguards were introduced in this legislation. And the safeguards are the following. It preserves judicial discretion. In other words, the judicial branch of power can prohibit, block a decision of a capital punishment. Secondly, did not mandate automatic sentencing. I heard politicians here in Australia who were saying that Israel mandated capital punishment for Palestinians. It's not true. It did not mandate automatic sentencing. On top of that, it allows an appeal. Anyone can appeal. Once the decision has been made of capital punishment, they can appeal to the judicial branch of power. And as I said before, the judicial has the discretion to cancel. It enables also presidency clemency. The president of Israel is an additional authority that can then also make a decision of clemency on such an act. And it is defined as terrorism. So terrorism which is acted out will fall under this category. I hope I've clarified.
Tom Lowry from the ABC.
Ambassador, thanks for taking the time to address the press club this afternoon. I also wanted to ask about the death penalty laws. Australia was one of a number of countries that urged urged the Knesset not to pass these laws, along with France, Germany, Italy and the UK. I wanted to ask how the input of countries like Australia and those co-signatories is received within Israel, particularly given there have been so many joint statements in recent years, particularly on the conflict in Gaza, urging restraint, urging a ceasefire. How is that input received within Israel? Is it taken seriously?
Every statement by a friend, by an ally, by a like-minded country is taken seriously. I can assure you that. When I hear such a statement, whether it be from the leadership of this country, of this wonderful country, we transfer it to Israel and it's taken seriously by Israel. But in the end, the cabinet of Israel has to make its decisions according to the strategic understanding of the needs of the people of Israel and the state of Israel. Sometimes people who are far away in different faraway countries can't also understand the threat. They can't understand the situation. We're in a difficult neighborhood, as I said before. We have neighbors who are bent on the destruction of the state of Israel, who are bent on terrorism. So there are elements that might be necessary in a country like that, which are not necessary in a country where your neighbors are New Zealand and Fiji. I wish my neighbors were Fiji and New Zealand. My life would be totally different. But those are not my neighbors. My neighbors are Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Syria, which is not very stable, and other countries in our region. That's our destiny, and that we'll have to live with. But when allies and friends come forward and they advise, send out statements, we take them seriously, we look into them, but not always can a sovereign state respect a request like that.
Phil Curry from the AFR.
Thanks, Tom. Ambassador, you said in your speech, I'd just like to take you back to the war against Iran. You said in your speech you envisaged the oil crisis would be temporary and minimal. The view within the Australian government is it's going to be anything but, and the fervent hope is that this thing will end sooner than later. But there's, as the Prime Minister has been saying publicly in recent days, there's a great deal of frustration, anger even with the US government over the prosecution of this war. There's no qualm with the need to take on Iran, but they feel the war's been poorly prosecuted, ham-fisted. You failed to anticipate that Iran would shut the Strait of Hormuz and attack the Gulf states. Does Israel share any, given it's a joint operation, do you share any joint responsibility for the way this war has worsened, if you like? And because if Donald Trump can't provide clarity when it's going to end, what's the best guess from Israel?
Yes. Thank you for your question. Look, this is a joint operation, United States and Israel. Israel did not drag the United States in. The United States did not drag Israel in. We certainly don't have the power to drag a superpower into a conflict. The two states, they see a strategic threat and decided to act upon it to remove existential threats. The fact that Israel and the United States of America see eye to eye on the strategic threat and decide to work on it is actually an action that should be commended by the international community, perhaps. We are opening options and even peace options for the entire international community. We're bringing perhaps freedom for the people of Iran. Part of a war is that you do have circumstances. Can I say that Israel takes responsibility for everything that the United States does, and the United States takes responsible for everything that Israel does? There is unprecedented coordination and cooperation. You can just imagine, you have flights flying in air. Many of the American pilots and airlines are in Israel. They launch from Israel in some cases. You have so many flights in the air, you have to be careful of friendly fire. There's so much coordination here and intimate intelligence sharing, unprecedented between the superpower of the world and a very small country, Israel. Israel is the size of New Jersey in the United States. So we take responsibility, of course, for the operation in general. We can't take responsibility for every action that the United States does, or the United States doesn't have to take responsibility for every action that we do unless it's coordinated in advance. The idea is to try and do this operation as short as possible. We all want a short deadline, attaining the objectives, and then the war will be over. The objectives are mainly, as I said before, removing the existential threats, ballistic missiles and uranium aspects, nuclear aspects. Once we remove those two objectives from our point of view, the war is over. We just need to attain the objectives. How long it will take, we do not set a deadline because we define it according to the objectives. Now, there might be a disruption of energy supplies during this period of time. The root cause is Iran and the proxies. Israel and the United States never attacked the Strait of Hormuz, never attacked commercial maritime shipping. The responsibility for the disruption of gas and oil supplies lies 100% with Iran and its proxies. And I just want to say that I commend the government of Australia and Prime Minister Albanese, who even said it categorically, rightfully. He said just yesterday in a press conference and other places that that responsibility lies with Iran and its proxies that disrupt the shipping lines and the supply chains of energy. I cannot tell you exactly how long it will take. All I can say is that the aspiration, both of the United States and Israel, is to finish the operation as soon as possible when we attain the objectives, and that many methods are being engaged in order to try and bring the disruption to a minimum, including, for instance, opening Iraq, export from Iraq, even opening export of oil from Iran. So many methods are being implemented in order to try and disperse the damage of the energy crisis.
Next question, Anna Henderson from SBS.
Thank you, Ambassador. Anna Henderson from SBS World News and a director here at the club. And I want to take this opportunity as well to pay tribute to the journalists and aid workers who have been killed doing their job internationally. Israel defence sources have told SBS that the investigation into the Israeli drone strike that killed Zomi Frankham in Gaza has been shelved and that there will be no prosecutions. After 2 years, her grieving family are pleading for justice. So what is the status of the Military Advocate General investigation into the death of Zomi Frankham? Will the Israeli Defence Force release the audio of the drone strike so the evidence is transparent? Will anyone be prosecuted, or was this one of those tragic mistakes in your view?
You say it's been shelved. I don't know on what basis you say that. I have not, and I'm the ambassador of Israel. I've never heard that it's been shelved. Okay? It could be that I'm not updated. I'll check. But let me say a few things about this. Every incident of an innocent person or aid worker that is affected by a war situation is tragic. And we've expressed full sympathy with the family. Very often we call for people to leave areas in order to not reach such a situation. We won't go into the details of the exact aid convoy and what happened, but great efforts are invested by the State of Israel in a time of a war situation, in a war zone, to warn the people and tell them not to be there. Israel is accused when they warn, and then they're accused if they don't warn.
My question is about an investigation.
I understand. I'm getting to
and whether there's a prosecution that you believe could come from it. Is there an investigation that's still active?
I understand. Relating to the facts of the situation in this aspect, I want to tell you something. The access that was given to Australia was unprecedented. There was an investigator on behalf of Australia who was given full access to the occurrence itself and to the military interrogation of what happened.
They weren't given access to the drone audio.
I'm talking about, there was an officer on behalf of Australia, Biskin, his name was?
Binskin.
He was given full access at the time to what was available.
He was given access to the drone audio. He says he wasn't.
Oh yeah, let me just finish my sentence and we'll relate to the video. He was given full access at the time to what they had available, and he drew up the conclusions together with, after his investigation, he drew up a conclusion that was categoric. He wrote his name onto this conclusion that the attack was not intentional. That was the biggest issue here, whether there was an intentional attack on aid workers by the State of Israel, which, if it would happen, would be a terrible mistake on behalf of Israel. It's not intended usually in any way. Sometimes you can make mistakes, but that is the big issue, whether it's intentional or not. He signed his own signature to the fact that it was not intentional. So the main finding is that. Now, the issue of penalizing the soldiers who were involved, or the aspects that were involved, is a long judicial process. As far as I know, it does not come to a conclusion. The reason is that if you have a situation where soldiers did an act of some kind which brought about the death of an aid worker, but it was not intentional, then you have to find the exact circumstances and you have to define the situation in order to find it legal binding to penalize. As far as I know, they have not come to final conclusions, not because they're delaying. I tell you, there are legal cases in Israel that go on for years. There are many legal cases which I can quote against Israelis who go on for years because the legal situation is complex. As far as I know, it has not come to that conclusion yet, but I will check again.
Will you commit to release the drone audio which the family is requesting?
I cannot commit that. That's not in my
not?
hands. It's in the IDF hands.
Why is
I
it
can
being
check.
withheld?
I can check why, if they assume that they're not releasing it, what is their reason?
Sometimes what
it's
would be a
been 2
reason
years.
to not release the drone audio?
it could have intelligence
Well, then why not
aspects.
Why not?
But I don't want to guess why.
No, but well, the next question though be why not let Mark Binskin listen to it? He could have pledged not to divulge anything. Why would he not be given it?
Well, I was not there at the time of his participation in the investigation. What I do
spoke
know
about what he signed and what he put in.
Yes, but what I do know is that he was given full access to the information that was at hand at the time, and he came to the understanding that it was not intended.
But the audio was available at the time and he wasn't given access to that.
I would have to check that.
That's what he said.
I would have to check why it's not possible to release that video information, if it is possible or not.
Ben Packham from The Australian.
Thanks, Ambassador. Donald Trump's threatening to destroy Iran's oil infrastructure. In fact, I think he said he could hit Karg Island just for fun. That would make the current oil crisis a lot worse, one would think. What is Israel's position on whether those facilities should be hit?
Well, I don't speak on behalf of President Trump. I'm not his spokesperson, and you're invited to turn to the White House for clarifications of what President Trump said. Yeah, but our stand is that we are acting in all the operative measures that we are taking are those that are guided for attaining the objective. Now, for instance, there was an attack on a gas field, but the attack on the gas field was an IRGC gas field, which did not export gas for the people of Iran or for the country of Iran, only for the financial revenues of the IRGC. And therefore, that gas field was attacked. So from our point of view, our missions are defined, and they're according to the attaining of the objectives. Whatever we think can lead as quick as possible to the attaining of the objectives, we do. We don't attack refineries just for the name of attacking refineries.
Well, that attack on the gas field, the retaliation for that was an attack on Qatar's oil infrastructure, as I remember. So with that in mind, do you think that more Iranian oil infrastructure should be hit, and what would be the implications of that?
Well, the responsibility for attacking other countries, third countries, is with Iran, not with Israel, not with the United States. Israel and the United States act according to the objectives of the war, and Iran can respond in the way it sees fit with the United States and Israel. It has their widening of the conflict just shows what a malign regime it is, and how it has a lack of any checks and balances. But the responsibility for attacking gas fields in other countries, including Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and other places, is with Iran, not with the United States.
Sorry, just to clarify, do you think Iran's oil infrastructure should be hit as Donald Trump is threatening?
look, the strategic decisions or tactical decisions of what to strike, in our view, is according to the objectives that we want to attain.
Thank you.
Sarah Bashford-Canyalas from The Guardian.
Thank you, Ambassador. Sarah from The Guardian. Israel's Defence Minister, Israel Katz, reportedly said the IDF will seize control of the remaining bridges and security zone up into the Litani River in pursuit of a defensive buffer. The Finance Minister, Bezalel Smotrich, has called for the Litani River to become the new border between Israel and Lebanon. Many nations, including Australia, have condemned any incursion by Israel into Lebanese sovereignty. Minister Smotrich's comments suggest Israel's presence isn't just defensive. Is Israel's military objective here to create a new border with Lebanon against the warnings of the international community, including Australia?
Israel's actions in Lebanon are 100% defensive. The idea is to distance the rocket launching from the people of Israel. Now, there are ministers. You know, Israel is a robust democracy. There are many opinions in Israel from far left to far right. Minister Smotrich represents jurisdiction of a specific kind, constituents of a specific kind, and he, as a minister, is allowed to view his opinion. But what is binding and what is policy is what is accepted and adopted in the cabinet of Israel. The cabinet of Israel has made the decisions, and Defense Minister Katz represents this very well in the aspect that they have defined the objectives. The incursion into Lebanon is a self-defensive incursion in order to distance as much as possible the rockets from falling on the northern part of Israel, which endangers close to 1 million citizens of Israel who currently have to run to shelters multiple times a day. For 15 seconds, they've got to reach a shelter. So this is an intolerable situation. And the idea is to take up positions which will be defensive positions. We call them forward defensive positions in order to prevent as much as possible the launching of rockets. If a day comes where we do not have Hezbollah operatives south of the Litani River launching rockets against the people of Israel, then of course Israel will not be there anymore.
And do you have a timeline on when that objective should be achieved or is expected to be?
It depends on many factors. For instance, will International Resolution, Security Council Resolution 1701 be implemented? 1701 calls for the demilitarizing of Hezbollah and not having any armed Hezbollah beyond the south of the Litani River. We're talking about exactly the same space, which in an international resolution has been decided that the Hezbollah should not be operative in that area. The resolution is not implemented. UNIFIL doesn't have the capability. In many ways, UNIFIL sometimes serves as a human shield for the Hezbollah because they don't dismantle them, they don't disarm them. So it comes a time when the people of Israel also have the right of self-defense, and Israel acts in order to prevent the launching of rockets and the falling of rockets on the Israeli people. When the necessity goes over, it will be not necessary anymore for Israelis to be in the southern part of Lebanon.
Thank you.
Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Ambassador, back to what Anna Henderson was asking about. Will you apologise to the family of Zomi Frankham? And secondly, do you worry that the perception of excesses in Israel's attacks in Gaza, the tens of thousands of women and children who've been killed, allegations of war crimes, have damaged Israel's reputation and taken the Middle East further away from peace rather than closer to it?
Thank you. Let me start with the latter part. Gaza. You know, numbers are released into the news. Genocide in Gaza. There was no genocide in Gaza. According to the figures of Hamas, which are unreliable and we have no trust in the figures of Hamas, right? According to Hamas, 70,000 were killed. Hamas doesn't make any distinction between combatants and uninvolved civilians. They also don't make a distinction between those that were killed by Israeli forces and those that were killed by Palestinian terrorism. For instance, rockets that fell short. Or for instance, booby traps that were spread all over Gaza to try and get Israeli soldiers, but many Palestinians were killed by these booby traps. Many Palestinians were killed by rockets that fell short. They launched them for the Islamic Jihad, and the Hamas launched rockets, and they fell short on the Gazans themselves. So there's no distinction between combatants and non-combatants. So when you hear 70,000, the world thinks uninvolved, innocent civilians, 70,000 were killed. It's not true. There's a clear distinction, first of all, one must make, a clear distinction between those that were combatants and those that were uninvolved civilians. There's make a distinction, if you want to accuse Israel of the numbers and say there was a genocide in Gaza, then you should look into how many were killed by Israel and how many were killed by Palestinian terrorism. Natural deaths. They count every natural death as a casualty of Israel. I can give you examples, and we can. It's manifested in many ways.
For 2 years, though, the IDF said the number was wrong, and then about a month ago that they said the numbers were right, but the
I'm saying, even if I take the Hamas numbers, which are
but
untrustworthy,
that's what the IDF has now taken. It has said.
I'm saying that's why I'm going according to that. I'm saying even if we take the Hamas numbers, which we don't regard as trustworthy because there's no way of verifying, Gaza just takes bodies and buries them or does whatever it does. There's no transparency. So there's no way of us knowing for exactly 70,000 or less or more. But I'm saying even if we take the numbers that we are referring to as 70,000, which is the Hamas number, if you take into consideration natural deaths, distinction of those that were combatants and those that were not combatants, we know more or less the number of combatants that have been killed. You take into consideration those that were killed by Palestinian fire and those that were killed. In the end, you come to a ratio of 1 to 1.5. That's the lowest ratio of civilians or uninvolved people, casualties in warfare, in urban warfare. The ratio is usually 1 to 9. 9 civilians for every combatant. So we look at Gaza, and we say in the end the ratio is 1 to 1.5.
Okay, well, of those many deaths, what do you say to Zomi Frankum's family? Will you apologise?
Okay, so we're talking about Gaza right now. So I'm just finishing off with Gaza, and I'm saying that there was no genocide in Gaza. The numbers do not depict what people on the streets think, because they don't look into the numbers and they don't understand the meaning of the numbers. The ratio in the end is the lowest in urban warfare, and therefore, in many ways, Israel should be commended for the low number of uninvolved civilians that were actually killed in the end. That's regarding the Gaza issue. There's a lot of disinformation that is spread, and people march on bridges shouting genocide, and they don't know what they're talking about. So the facts are important. Regarding the family, as I said, as far as I know, Israel is caring for the family, and the fact that every case like this is a tragedy. An aid worker that was killed unintentionally, even though it was unintentional, it is regarded as a tragedy on the part of Israel. And we do sympathize with the family.
Do you apologise, and are you going to pay reparations?
That is a decision that I think will be dependent on the outcome of the final interrogation.
An apology for killing
Sympathy with the
Zomi
family
and 6
has been
other aid
expressed.
workers?
Sympathy has been expressed, as far as I know.
Okay. James Mager from Bloomberg.
Good afternoon, Ambassador. I have 2 quick questions. One, you said the majority of journalists or the majority of people who were claimed to be journalists who were killed in the wars were not actually journalists, were actually terrorists. What is the number of the minority of those people who were killed who were actually journalists? You obviously have very clear data on the people who were just killed in Lebanon a few days ago. So how of those 250 plus people who were ostensibly journalists, how many were actually journalists and were killed either accidentally or deliberately? And my second question is, you've spoken about the war objectives in Iran. You said that it was to deal with an existential threat of ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. You then went on to talk about a number of times about regime change, bringing freedom to the people of Iran. What are the actual war aims of the Israeli military? And when will you know those have been achieved? I mean, Penny Wong has been very clear when she thinks regime change cannot be achieved by external forces. Can you achieve regime change and freedom for the Iranian people with just airstrikes, or does that require something else? Thank you.
Sure. Regarding your first question, the honest truth is that we have no way of knowing the exact amount of journalists who are 100% journalists who were killed. and this goes back to the issue of the lack of transparency. The Hamas and the Hezbollah, both from different parts of the map, have their interests in spreading misinformation, deceive the public, and trying to accuse Israel of anything that happens in the region. And they commit 2 war crimes. They shoot from residential areas, populated areas, and they target populated areas, which is a double war crime, whereas Israel is careful, pinpointed, precise in its actions, and does not target civilians and does not shoot from civilian areas. The problem is the lack of transparency, where you do not know when people are killed, you do not always know how many are killed, who they are exactly. There's a bit of a blurrity, and you can't rely on what comes out from Hamas and Hezbollah as authentic. But what we can do is we can list the people that we know that we've hit, and would know for 100% that we've hit, and then check their credentials. And I can send you lists of dozens of people who presented themselves as journalists, but they were Hamas or Hezbollah operatives. I can send them to you after this session. But no one can tell you the exact number. Regarding regime change, we do not define regime change as the objective of the war. We define the removal of the existential threats, which many would say that you cannot really remove the existential threats without a removal of the regime, because the regime will always pursue nuclear capability and ballistic missile production, even if one man is left standing in Iran. So we understand that there is this complication, but we feel that the regime change must come from the people of Iran. We understand that they cannot go out on the streets right now because there's a military confrontation, they're in harm's way. And we don't expect people to go onto the streets while there's operational activity. But there is a strong chance that when we cease the military activity, there is a strong, high probability that the people of Iran will then hit the streets and topple the regime. But it is their decision. Therefore, for that reason, we have not defined regime change as our objective, because in the end, we leave it up for the people. The people of Iran must take their destiny in their own hands and make that decision.
Just about out of time, but when you first landed, you were asked about the school that was seemingly struck in Iran. You cast doubt on whether it was a school and said that site had been used by the IRGC. We've had since several photographs independently verified of the school, including blood-stained notebooks, up to 100 children believed to have died. Also parents sharing stories and photos of their dead children with journalists. A US inquiry reportedly found there was outdated intelligence. Did this happen? Was it a school? And if so, does it show the threshold for confirming military targets is too low?
Yes. Again, I say this very clearly. Any civilian or uninvolved person who is affected by a military confrontation or a war that is going on, it is a tragedy. It's a tragedy on behalf of the State of Israel. It's a tragedy, I'm sure, also on behalf of the United States of America. There is no intentional targeting of schools, of any uninvolved civilians. In a situation of war, tragically, you can have situations where individuals who are uninvolved get damaged in some way or another. The way you measure such a situation is the utmost effort that you put in order to prevent such situations. But you cannot reach zero.
But is the threshold right if this was, that was outdated intelligence, probably should have looked at that? That's 100 children.
Now, in relation to the school, to tell you the truth, we've heard from Iranian expats here in Australia that they believe it's not true, that the school was not attacked. Now, what we do know is that by the way, it was the United States attack. It wasn't an Israeli attack.
Yes.
That's been identified already. And the United States has said itself that it's under investigation. The United States has not concluded, and I'm sure that you all agree with me, that the United States is a transparent government, that if they know the truth, they will say it, right? I believe so, and Israel is also such that we're very careful that we base our, what we call public relations on truth. We don't.
Shouldn't you do that rather than saying, I've heard from some experts, maybe it's not true? If that's the important...
I'm saying we don't know. I'm saying that we really don't know. The pictures that were taken, you can't rely on pictures in today's world of a scene of some kind. You need objective authentication of the incident and of the people that were affected. What we do know is that the United States of America has said it itself that they did not target a school. They believed, according to the parameters that they had, that this was an IRGC facility and governmental facilities. The possibility that there was a school in the vicinity is what aroused the interest of everybody, because it seemed as if there is a school and they were attacked in some way or another. What we do know is that it was not intentional, and we do not know for a fact yet that we can authenticate this issue. If it's under investigation in the United States, let's wait for the findings of the United States.
Ambassador, a busy time for you. We do appreciate your time here at the National Press Club. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Ambassador.
Thank you.
Thank you.